Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Laura Svancarek. I'm the Interim Executive Director at Downtown on the Go. We are your nonprofit advocate and resource for all things transportation in the greater Tacoma area. As always, we're really excited to offer these forums in a hybrid format. Really excited about all the people who are here in the room with us. There's quite a lot of you, so this is very exciting. Thank you for coming. And we love being able to have the hybrid option as well. And big thanks to the Office of Events and Conferences here at UW Tacoma for helping us to access this space. Really appreciate that from them. For our 2025 Friday Forum series, we are exploring how Tacoma, both the city and its residents, is changing through discussions on new and upcoming policy, the impacts of rising housing costs and displacement, and the future of transit in the South Sound. Today, we are digging into transit. If you frequently come to these, you might notice I'm in a different spot than usual. So logistics might look a little bit different for us today, but very excited to jump into this conversation. There will be a Q&A section at the end. People in the room, you have cards. Rebecca up at the front will collect those for you towards the end. If you are on the Zoom or the Teams webinar, you can put your question in the chat at any time. Rebecca will get that written down, and then we'll get it to Tanisha. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tanisha and we'll get started.
Great. Thank you for being with us for the last Friday Forum of this season. I had a revelation a couple nights ago that in 2 days it will be my 10-year anniversary being back home. And so that means this is the conclusion of my 9th season with Downtown on the Go. And so that's very exciting. We've had lots of great conversations and I'm excited to have another one today. And I think Andrew is a repeat from maybe my first year. So this is like a little reunion for me and I'm having my own personal moment. Thank you all for being here with me. Okay. All right. So you know how this goes. It's going to go fast. We'll never have enough time. Write down your good questions and get them to Rebecca, and I will try my very best to get them all answered. And we will hang around for a few minutes after for the questions that we didn't, if you have something that's just super pressing that we didn't get to answer. So with that, I am going to let my panel introduce themselves, and we're not going to start with Laura because you already know her. So we're going to go ahead and start down at the end with Andrew, and just give us a little bit about who you are, what organization you represent, and yep.
Great. It's very fun to be back, and yes, I think that was upon one of my returns to Tacoma. So I'm Andrew. I'm the Executive Director of Government and Community Relations at Sound Transit. So I'm happy to be here. So I oversee the team that does state, federal, tribal, and importantly to this conversation, local government relations. Prior to that, I was at Metro Parks Tacoma with my friend and former boss and now board member, Hunter George over there. And then prior to that, I worked in the transportation advocacy space for a long time at a few places, but most notably at an important partner to Downtown on the Go, Transportation Choices Coalition. So that's who I am.
I'm Ryan, Chief Planning Officer at Pierce Transit. The group that I work with handles planning, community development, and paratransit. So we have the planning and scheduling team. We also work on grants, bus stop program, which is a big deal for folks. We also have marketing, community outreach, engagement, business sales, the 12th largest van pool program in the country, and then a very robust paratransit system.
And I did introduce myself already, but I'll say, I'm both here as the Executive Director of Downtown on the Go, but also as a transit user. I started riding the bus by myself at about 13 and just never stopped. I think I grew up on the bus, honestly, is how it feels to me. So very excited to talk about transit always.
All right. Well, we're going to jump right into the questions because I know we have lots to talk about. So Ryan, I'm going to start with you. What are your agency's biggest goals for transit in Tacoma and Pierce County?
We kind of focus on 3 main things that are a lot more difficult than they sound. So for us, it's ridership, revenue, and expansion in that order. We are very cognizant of the fact that our system is not where it should be. It's also not where it was pre-pandemic, and there are a lot of reasons for that. The primary driver for us is how much revenue we have, but also the people that we can recruit. So for about 3 years, we could not find enough drivers. And we're happy to report that we now do have enough drivers, but we do not have enough people to work in maintenance. So if you or anybody that you know are interested in working on a bus, I would be remiss if I didn't say you should call 253-581-8000 and find out how to apply for one of our jobs, because we're in real need. And for us, we look at the hours that an operator or a bus driver can do each year, and the hours that we can put in service for every maintenance person. So for every mechanic that we lose the capacity for 20,000 service hours. And for us, that is a very big deal. So we're interested in ridership. We know that the connections that we're able to make based on the service that we put out are not where they need to be. And ultimately, in order to make that better, we have to find a new way to raise revenue. We have one tool. We have sales tax outside of fare box and our grants. We have the ability to raise sales tax, and that is something that we look at very heavily, and we're trying to build relationships to have better conversations around that over the next year or two. And the third thing, not a week goes by, including this week at 3:30 when I have a call with a city that's not in our service area, where we get asked, why are you not in Bonnie Lake or Sumner or Frederickson or Key Peninsula? And so we understand that areas that left Pierce Transit's boundaries about 12 years ago, they want back in. It is a very difficult process, but those are our communities. Our employees live in some of those places, and we're interested to get back there. The path for us to do that is very difficult. So those three things, ridership, revenue, and expansion, are the things we focus on.
One thing before you pass the mic to Andrew, when we were talking and I was trying to just understand, you were sharing like what the fare actually covers. Do you mind sharing that? Because that was very eye-opening for me.
Much, as it turns out.
Because I was thinking, oh, well, we'll just get more people on the bus and that'll solve the problem.
We have not raised our fare in about 15 years. So if you can find anything else that costs the same thing or the same as it did in 2010, I'd love to hear about it. But we're $2 for a fare. When you take into consideration Youth Ride Free, our discount programs, and just fare evasion, we collect less than $1 per ride. So we're at about 80 cents per trip. It costs us $13 for every single local bus route or bus ride. It costs about $11 for every vanpool trip, $90 for runner trip, $80 for a shuttle paratransit trip. So the fare that we pay, we love when people pay. But the fact is, all of our trips are subsidized, all transit subsidized. So for us, raising the fare doesn't get where we need to go to increase service.
Yeah, thank you. It's very helpful. Andrew, what's going on at Sound Transit?
Yeah, so Sound Transit, over the course of its shorter history, but still, we're getting kind of older now, was really seen externally and also kind of internally as a capital construction agency. That our job, and still is our job, to expand high capacity transit across the 3-county region. We work in 3 counties with 52 cities, 14 tribes, a whole bunch of interested parties and players. So I'm going to talk about the capital piece in a second, but I think over the course of the last few years, the agency has taken a more keen look at the operating side, just recognizing that we're providing more and more rides across the 3-county region, and we're increasingly an important player in how people get around in their daily life. So we can't just be a capital construction agency. We also have to be an excellently run operating agency that people rely upon every day. Our light rail system is now the 4th largest, which has not reached Pierce County yet, except for the T-line, which we all love. But our light rail system, especially with the recent expansions up to Northgate and Linwood, is now the 4th largest light rail system in the country. So just in terms of the number of people and then as we expand light rail, our bus partners like Pierce Transit, Community Transit, and Metro reorient their service to maximize their service hours to get people to light rail, which right now is north and south. So we have to make sure our light rail and our Sound Transit Express bus and our Sounder trains are reliable and resilient, and people can count on them. So that's an important piece that today is a growing piece of our work and is important to Pierce County too, with the number of folks who take Sounder or the T-line or Sound Transit Express here in and out of Pierce County. An interesting tidbit with that is that the only operations that Sound Transit actually runs ourselves is the T-line. Everything else is run by one of the 3 transit partners. So our main link light rail system is run by King County Metro Rail. Pierce Transit operates all of our buses that come in and out of Pierce County. So Ryan's challenges with driver recruitment are also all our challenges, and it's a really important partnership. So to the end of what he just said, we're now getting back to pre-pandemic or pre-cuts levels to the Sound Transit Express, which is important because people are starting to get around a lot more as we come out of the pandemic and ridership is up. So that operations piece, delivering every day, really important. We can't lose sight of that. And then, of course, it's continued expansion as we've promised to the voters. And for Pierce County, that's really oriented around 2 major things with some other ones mixed in. But the 2 major ones, of course, are getting Link Light Rail down from Federal Way, which will open next year, which is really exciting. I think it's going to be that much closer for Pierce County riders to see the possibilities of what it could mean, whether they drive up to Federal Way and park in a parking garage and go to a work or a, football game, or take the bus, because we're going to have, or take the bus, because we're going to make sure that those bus connections to that light rail are really strong. I think our ridership estimates, Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we estimate that 70% of the people getting on that system at downtown Federal Way are going to be taking transit and 30% are going to be driving. I got it. Good. So that is going to be an important connection for people to kind of see what's coming and have it be that much closer. But then, of course, we've got to do the hard work to get it down to Fife through Milton with stops in Fife and Tacoma. So that's first and foremost on our mind, and I think the public's mind for delivering on ST3. We also have investments coming to Sounder, which is really important for East Pierce County. A lot of those Sounder riders aren't ever going to be particularly close to our currently designed light rail system. So that's an important piece that's still under development for looking at increased trips possibly and increased capacity. And then we have a smattering of other exciting projects. We're working with the city to implement some Sound Transit 2 projects for increased access to sounder stations in South Tacoma and Lakewood, and really focusing collaboratively with the city on bike ped projects there, which are going really well, and those are going to be awesome to deliver. And then we, of course, have, I would be remiss to not state this in front of one of our board members who I already mentioned in the room, but further out in the Sound Transit 3 program, we have the TCC T-line extension planned. We have not started planning on that, so that's just like still a twinkle in everyone's eye, but that'll be another important project down the road. So I'll stop talking with that, but there's definitely a lot coming.
Well, I have a question for you, so you have to talk a little bit longer. So I remember being at the city the first time Sound Transit presented on the light rail, and I remember that the years felt like they were very, very far away. I feel like the light rail in Tacoma has expanded quicker than I thought. I remember, I was writing 2025 at that point, and so 2025 seemed far away, and here we are. So, but at that moment, I remember thinking, like, God, I don't know if I'll even still be in Tacoma by the time this happened. So I know you can't probably give me a specific date, but when would the connection, like, what's approximate time frame of the connection from Federal Way to Tacoma?
Yeah, so let me just first say, I think it always feels long. And when we do, public polling and things, the thing we hear the most is, I love light rail, get it to me faster, which is a good problem to have.
Right.
And I think what we have experienced is the challenge between, when we adopted Sound Transit 3, the board adopted a very aggressive timeline, and we are trying to keep up with that timeline.
Gotcha.
And that's mostly from a planning and development standpoint, but then it's also from a financial planning standpoint in terms of what we can do when. So the current delivery date for getting all the way to Tacoma published is, remind me, 2030, yes, 35.
Okay.
Am I 100% sure it'll be 2035 forever? No, I think but that's what we're driving towards in terms of our project development.
Laura and I will put you on the schedule for 2035, so you can tell us.
Sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Laura, tell us about what you and your organization do on, what are your biggest issues, goals around transit?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we want to see more transit. We want to see more people riding transit more. We want to see more access, and we want to see transit that makes sense for Tacoma. We have kind of an interesting setup in Tacoma where, at least in the downtown area, there's two major transit hubs. There's Commerce Street, which serves the majority of downtown, that has a lot of those local connections. There's also Tacoma Dome Station, and that has a lot of those regional connections. And sometimes it works out that you can get from your house to the correct one of those hubs for where you're trying to go next. A lot of the time it doesn't, as we're seeing more local service shifting over to serving Tacoma Dome Station. In some ways that can work out really well. In other ways, it can add a time penalty or a transfer penalty for local riders who are just trying to get to Commerce Street Station, where maybe they're trying to get to the office or they're trying to go to a shop in downtown, not trying to get out of the county on those Sound Transit services, but trying to stay local. So that's something that we're keeping in mind as we're looking at future transit in the region. I think it's also interesting to think about, community priorities around transit are so dependent on what type of transit user you're talking about. I think broadly you can classify people into two categories. You have people who rely on transit and people who choose to take transit. People who rely on transit are looking for the ability to access services, jobs, education. They want to be able to get between communities to be able to visit their friends, their family. We did a Friday forum last year about youth mobility, and that was a big part of it. Is young people want to be able to get to the mall, and they want to be able to get to their friends' houses. They want to be able to actually have access to things that are not just job centers. When you think about people who choose to take transit, I mean, you can split that into even smaller categories. You have people who occasionally take transit, maybe for a particular event that they're going to. Maybe they're going to Tacoma Pride and they don't want to have to try to park downtown, because why would you want to when you could take the bus, right? Or they're going up to Seattle for a concert or a sports event, something like that. So it's an individual case-by-case basis. They're choosing to take the bus. Those people just want to know that the service is going to be where it's going to be there when they want it. It's going to connect them from point A to point B, and they're not going to think about it too much more beyond that. But we also have people who commute by transit, especially people who go to Tacoma Dome Station and then up to King County using those Sound Transit services. And so that's all about frequency and convenience. But on the whole, people who take transit just want the same things overall. What I hear from community members is frequency, especially weekend and evening frequency. People want to be able to take the bus to go out with their friends and then be able to take the bus home. And that's something that we as a community should all want. Fewer people trying to drive home from bars. So having good, late, frequent transit service helps to achieve that goal, right? We hear about people wanting to feel safe. I might talk about this later, but there's often, I think, an inaccurate perception that transit is inherently less safe than driving. It's not. But that doesn't change the fact that people, especially women, alone, especially if it's dark, might feel unsafe waiting for transit. So people want to feel safe making this choice. And people want to feel comfortable. And I think a lot of it comes down to feeling respected in our community, as a member of our community, trying to get from point A to point B. When you're standing at a bus stop in the rain with no cover and no bench, you don't feel respected. You don't feel like your community is planning to include you as a valued member of the community. So broadly, those are the kinds of things that we hear from community members that we try to take into our advocacy work.
I think it's interesting you said that, because I think when I heard the first forum, I grew up in Steilacoom. Our transit is you walk down to the ferry and then you ride the ferry to Anderson Island and then you come back. And no offense to Anderson Island, you only need to do that once. You do not need to do that multiple times. So And I do remember as a kid, not my parents, now I'm dating myself, my parents didn't want me to drive to Seattle, so I could drive and I could drive my car onto a ferry and I could go to Seattle and I could come back because they didn't want me to drive I-5 and they didn't want me to come to downtown Tacoma. But I didn't understand, like I never had been a transit rider, and I went to college in a very farm town in Ohio, and so there was no place to go, so there was no need to get on a transit for that. And so in the time since I came here, my daughter graduated from college. She lived with me for a couple of months, and then she moved to Seattle. She opted not to have a car. She's an engineer. She opted not to have a car because the cost of, I think each job gave her like $150 for parking. She could get a bus pass for that. She could save the money for a parking garage. She also didn't have to pay for parking at her garage, which allowed her to get a nicer apartment in a better part. She literally walks out her door. There's transit right there. She can navigate the entire city of Seattle, never needing a car, very rarely uses Ubers. And I did not understand what a benefit that was until I did it with her a few times. And I think one of the things I've heard over these years is people wanting to know, what will it take for that to happen in Tacoma? Like, what needs to happen for that to happen in Tacoma? And I would love to just kind of hear from both you, Andrew and Ryan, like what would need, I mean, is that even possible? I mean, I know that there are real barriers to that, and you talked about some of your challenges. So, what would that take, and what would you need from the community to support creating that type of vision?
Ryan wants me to take the first stab at this. So let me just speak from personal experience and then talk policy level. So personal experience, I have a car now. In my 20s when I lived here, I didn't. All the things Laura just said, when I lived here in my 20s without a car, was it as easy as it is for your daughter right now in Seattle? No. Was it easier than it is right now because of the pandemic and worker shortages and funding challenges, especially at Pierce Transit? Yeah, I used to be able to, just to put a point on it, Laura, like I remember being able to catch the bus home to downtown from the Parkway at 1:30 a.m. in Tacoma, Washington, right? Like that was awesome when I was 22. And safer than biking even, actually. So my first thing I think answer to your question is that Pierce Transit does not have the funding levels or the service levels that our local transit partners in King County and Snohomish County have. So we're never going to get everything Ryan said earlier about Pierce Transit's funding. I actually think is first and foremost to answering your question. And then I think secondly, the investments that Sound Transit is making to connect us to the regional system, and then also eventually get us out to TCC, which is more of a inside Pierce County Tacoma connection, I think will help transition the mindset around what kind of community we can be that's focused on transit as an easier or easy primary way to get around.
Yeah.
We do have I mentioned earlier, the funding issue for us is when you look at the 6 top counties by population in Washington State, Pierce County is the lowest funded local transit agency or local transit county. We have, I think, done a disservice to the community by not being more clear about what the future looks like for transit. And if we look back 16 years ago, we did 50% more service hours in this county. We had 5 more cities and unincorporated Pierce County that were incorporated in our service area. We ran service late, we ran service early, it was more frequent. We just did a lot more. So it can be done. Mm-hmm. I've lived in 2 states that I didn't have to have a car, and I don't know that we'll ever be at the level that downtown Seattle or King County Metro is at, but we can certainly do better. And I think as an agency, our job is to get out and have conversations like these and go to where people are having conversations about what they need and try to get more information to them about how we can help them. But certainly the funding has fallen, I think, on deaf ears a lot because we talk about what we need, but we don't talk about how to get there. And just to put things in perspective, everybody's a planner. Everybody has a great idea for a route, and they are almost always great ideas. usually run out of money or people to run those ideas. But we like to tell folks at the office, any idea you have most likely is $1 million. I mean, any route that you can provide us or even really good increased frequency, going to be $1 million. And for about 8 years, we've been stuck in a spot where we can do something in Stillicum, but we've got to take service from somewhere else to do that. So we're over $200 per service hour. Every hour that a bus is outside of our lot, it's at least $200. And that number racks up really, really fast. So
Yeah.
we're careful with the funds, and we think that we do a good job with the funds that we receive. I mean, we put our performance up against anybody in the state. So Sound Transit's here. We operate their service. I won't talk about them, but I would take a Pierce Transit operator or a maintenance person over King County Metro, C-Trans, Spokane Transit, Community Transit, Kitsap Transit any day of the week, because they do so much with the amount of funding that we have. And I know, I mean, I've been to these brand new headquarters that these other agencies are building. And then I walk into my office and think, well, you know, at least we don't ever have to take complaints over how palatial our stuff looks. But the reality is it comes back to the funding. We have to get out and talk to people about how to fund appropriate service for what they actually want in their life.
Yeah, I think that's a really, I mean, of all of these conversations, I don't think we've actually talked about that. So, you know, when it comes to, you know, these forums and the people that show up at these forums, these are people who like want to go out and get something done. So like, what is it? Where do they need to show up? How do we articulate to the decision makers what we need, what we want? And how do you approximate, I mean, if it's, you know, $1 million for every route, I mean, how do you even start to think about that?
Right now is a good time to have the conversation. So our long-range plan, we've been working on it for a year in conjunction with the 13 cities and Pierce County that are in our district. So giving input online is a really good way to start the conversation. But we've been begging people to invite us out for the last few years. And if there are groups, doesn't matter what kind of group it is, we are willing to send our folks out. We're willing to send executives out, our outreach team out. We're willing to have the conversations because we do really want to know what people need from our system. But more than that, we want to explain to people how we get there together. So you can call me. And if you call 581-8000, one, you can get that application for your job as a heavy vehicle maintainer, but you can also ask for Ryan, and we'd be happy to send folks out and have that conversation.
Thank you. Andrew?
I'm just going to speak as Andrew a little bit for a second, more so than Andrew with his Sound Transit hat on. But I mean, I don't know. Good question. I mean, I think the for better or worse, most local transit in the state is funded through sales tax. Sales tax brings in a lot of revenue. It's a little fluctuates a lot. So and you know, it has equity challenges with it, but that's the means with which we fund local transit. I think the bad news for especially Pierce Transit is that they're not at the same level as most of their peer transit agencies across the state. They're at 0.6. STA is at Spokane Transit's at 0.8. King County Metro's at 0.9. Community Transit and intercity transit got special permission to go above 0.9 from the legislature, so they're higher. So that reality over the history of Pierce Transit shows up in everything Ryan's talking about, and that's the bad news. The good news is they have authority that they could go after, asking the voters to approve that most other local transit agencies have already used up. So it's a double-sided coin.
So, not to put you on the spot, there's a lot of people that don't understand, you know, how much we spend on Sound Transit and what we get back from that. And I think that, you know, I work at the school district. I used to work at the city. People used to call me and ask why the school district was calling a snow day, or why did we call a snow day? And so there's a lot of people that do like, or why is Metro Parks closed today? And I'm like, I don't know, but I could call Sean for you. Like, so I think there is where people don't know where your one line ends and the other begins, and they think, well, I'm paying this car tab because I was at the city during the car tab thing. I hear about it all the time. I pay this car tab. I pay all these taxes. Why isn't the bus here where, like, they don't understand that line. And so can you maybe help provide a little bit of clarity to that?
Yeah, no, and I think it's a valid issue. Like people, as we like to say, people don't care what color their bus is. They just want to get from point A to point B. So I think it's incumbent upon us at Sound Transit to do a few things. One, kind of dispel this notion that Sound Transit has not invested in Pierce County. And that's something we hear a lot. And I think that what is really behind that is Sound Transit has not gotten their big link trains to Pierce County, which is true. What isn't true is that we've been investing in very good regional bus service, connecting people from Pierce County North and connecting people from King County South. It's both ways, and that's important. We've invested in regional sounder service and the T-line, as even though it started little and now it's bigger and connecting more people, that was the first rail we built. So it's telling folks what we have done. It's continuing to talk about what we are doing and the importance of getting light rail, big light rail down from South King County to Pierce County and Fife and Tacoma, because I think that will really kind of like revolutionize the tangible benefit people feel. So we have to do that and keep talking about it. And then this is the hardest one, we have to try to explain the policy sort of behind how the differences in how our transit agencies are funded and who does what, and how we have very different missions and different service areas. I mean, we have communities like Sumner that left Pierce Transit that are still paying taxes and getting service from Sound Transit. And then there are many communities that Sound Transit doesn't serve that are in Pierce Transit. So we have to explain that over and over and do that together. We get
the question all, and there are people at Pierce Transit that don't know the difference. I mean, half of the vehicles that are in our yard are Sound Transit vehicles. So it doesn't matter if it's an elderly couple coming in to ask me why their lawn care business or the lawn care bill has a regional tax on it, or if it's somebody at the agency asking, why don't we just not build light rail and just put more buses in? We have a very difficult time with the conversation, and they don't care what color their buses are because they're all blue and green. It doesn't matter where you go in this region. I can't explain to people what bus we drive, but we don't talk about this enough, and we should highlight this. Sound Transit has been a fantastic partner, not just for this region, but for our agency. During the recession, they saved a couple hundred jobs. Currently, a third of the Pierce Transit employees are directly related to the Sound Transit contract. So over 300 jobs that would have otherwise gone to maybe King County Metro or somebody else have remained not just in Pierce County, but at Pierce Transit.
That's super good. We got to ride one of the 14 electric school buses that we got at Tacoma Public Schools. We did a ribbon cutting yesterday, and I got to ride on the electric bus, and it was amazing how quiet it was and how like smooth the ride was. And I got the same thing from the media and people that were there. Were like, you should put a lightning bolt on the side, or you should like make it so that everybody knows this is an electric bus. And I was like,
Transit has lightning things on the side. They're doing it. Yeah, or like a big plug-in or something. But when it drives up that it's electric.
Yeah, you can't smell it. School buses are very regulated, so I can't figure it out, but I will find a way to put, so when you see the lightning bolt, honk at it. So, but yeah, we have our first in Revolution. So one of the things that First Student was saying is that the electric bus buses require less maintenance. They kind of are better for the environment, and they break down less because they have less parts than another bus. Like how far are you guys down the electrification route? And is that a real option for you in terms of cost savings or any of that?
I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want the feds to take all of our money after this meeting. So I think we have about 9 vehicles. Our goal is to get to about 20% of our fleet, but we could buy one. They are difficult to get because the lead time is so long, but it's the infrastructure. So we received a $15 million grant earlier this year in the fall to put in charging infrastructure. We are still waiting to figure out if we're going to actually get that money. So if we get it, we will expand. If we don't, then we'll adjust. Pierce Transit's in a unique position, though. We have had compressed natural gas as our primary propulsion system since 1986. So we aren't transitioning really any vehicles of our own fleet from diesel to electric. Most of ours are CNG transitioning to electric, which we're still interested in. The landscape is just very, very different than it was before. So we're moving forward with what we've got. We just don't know how much we're going to be able to do.
Okay.
It's just definitely a kind of a trade-off situation of you have higher capital costs to buy electric buses, but the operating costs are lower. And of course, all these secondary benefits like cleaner air. So it's a good thing to keep having conversations and pushing. Sound Transit's in this kind of early stages of looking at transitioning our regional express fleet, which is a little harder because they do these long runs. But our Stride Bus Rapid Transit project, which is under design and construction, not construction yet, but design now, and it's going to be basically all along the 405 corridor. It'll have 100% electric bus fleet, which will be a great sort of model to look at of what does an all electric bus fleet for a unique bus system look like.
And I think electrification of buses is an interesting conversation as well. I mean, to my understanding, most of the funding for this comes from grants, right, and federal funding. But something that I do hear from members of the community is I would rather they spend money, spend those funds on additional service or paying operators more instead. And obviously, it's not really a one-to-one because of where the funding comes from, but it is an interesting conversation from the outside of people who don't know all of the mechanisms in place here, where, I mean, really the carbon savings of a bus is in getting cars off of the road and in getting fewer people driving. If we can reduce emissions additionally from there, that's great. But something that I do hear frequently is, do we need to be so focused on electrifying buses rather than service? And so I'm curious how this conversation will change as we see a change in funding options for it.
Laura, while you have the mic, I know you've done a lot of work. You've come to my job to talk about trip reduction and working with businesses, which I think does help drive more people to use the buses and, riding their bikes and different options. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Trip reduction, yeah. Commute trip reduction is a state program. It's a state law requiring large employers to work to mitigate the impacts of their employees commuting to the same place at the same time every day. I won't get too in the weeds there, but the idea is that we're supporting businesses in providing better commuter benefits, including things like Orca cards to their employees that make it easier to make the choice to take a sustainable trip type instead of driving alone. And a big part of that is just getting the information to people. A lot of folks will just assume that the bus will never work for them, and maybe it won't, but a lot of the time, especially if they're in downtown Tacoma, it will. There's a lot of bus routes that come into downtown Tacoma and a lot of options. So some of the time it's just getting the information to people, helping them to understand what their options are, what the resources are, what the supports are. But really a big part of it is just coming in with enthusiasm for transit or for cycling or for carpooling and helping to address kind of this cultural issue that we have around transit, this idea that it's unsafe or this idea that it's for other people. Either it's a valiant choice that you make because you're doing such a good job to reduce your carbon footprint and you deserve a pat on the back, or you have to because you're destitute and it's your only option. And obviously that is so far from the reality of what transit is. And I only hear that kind of stuff from people who don't take the bus anywhere, because once you take transit with any degree of frequency, you see that there's all kinds of people, all ages, all backgrounds on the bus, chatting with each other, chatting with the bus driver, helping each other. I've seen people, get off the bus to stop early to help somebody carry their groceries. I've seen people, making funny faces at people's children, who loves the bus? Kids, especially babies. But I mean, it sounds corny, right? But I genuinely love taking the bus. it's great, it's fun, it's convenient, right? And a huge part of this is just introducing the idea to people that taking transit can be enjoyable and can work.
I think that's a huge point. I mean, I was a young mom with 3 kids. The idea of even trying to take the bus just felt like one more thing. And I think there has to be real experiences for people. I remember when they started the route that went to, the first time I ever rode a bus besides a Head Start field trip, which we will not talk about, riding a city bus with 20 people under the age of 4. Not a great experience. But they loved it. I did not. And that was a long time ago, and that was in Ohio. But here, the only time I rode a bus is when there was the route that went down to Point Ruston, and Christina was in your role, and she took me on the bus, and I was like, this is actually very cool, and I would do this a lot because it's way better than trying to get, especially at the city, because I worked at parked in a parking garage. I had to walk 2 blocks down to the parking garage, get in my car, drive to Point Ruston, find a parking spot there, eat, and then come back at lunchtime. So when that route was going, I was like, that's a very cool thing. But I think there has to be little examples like that that break someone from the convenience of my car and me being able to come and go as I please. And when you guys came to the district and talked about the plan of like, if there's an emergency, you can call and get an Uber or whatever, like people don't know about those types of things that feel like, well, I can't carpool because I have kids, and if they get sick, I have to be able to get to them. And so like really communicating to people these alternatives that make it less inconvenient, because at the end of the day, our country thrives on convenience. We are just spoiled in that way, and we are always looking for the most convenient, easiest way that will have the least impact on me. So I think that's important. We're going to jump to questions. So the first one I have is, as a resident of downtown Tacoma, I've noticed the monthly parking at garages near transit centers, especially Commerce, is actually less than the monthly transit pass. How can we communicate to those who work nearby that may live near transit lines to consider using transit instead of driving to from work? If you have ever waited at the Theater District station at 5 p.m., it's a long line of single occupied cars exiting those garages. Laura, you want to take that one?
So that does connect, directly to that commute trip reduction work. We work with the largest employers in downtown Tacoma, and we work in partnership with Pierce County and the county's CTR program as well. Yeah, again, I really think it's just getting that information to people. And I think, if I have a call to action today, it's ride the bus and get your friends to ride the bus. You don't have to shift everything about your life, but, pick 1 or 2 or 3 things that you can take the bus to the next time you're going to an event, or, just as like a fun adventure to have with your friends. Again, I know it sounds corny, but I really feel strongly about this. But a huge part of it is just introducing people to the idea that the options are there, and you can take transit, you can do it, and to have somebody help walk you through those first steps of doing it, how to use an Orca card, how to, where to catch the bus when it comes, how to get the real-time arrival information from transit app, things like that. It's just getting that information. So we're doing the work with the businesses in partnership with those businesses and with the city of Tacoma and with Pierce County. But it also needs to be something that we as transit enthusiasts here need to be taking on that role as well. Bully your friends into riding the bus.
Yeah. I mean, I loved it when we got the Orca cars at the city. I never drove to Seattle after we got that card. I just would ride the train, and I was like, this is so much better than driving. I'm like listening to music and chilling instead of yelling at cars. That's great. I think this is for Andrew. What is the rationale behind terminating Link at Tacoma Dome rather than downtown? Is there a possibility of extending Link to downtown in the future?
So the termination of the Tacoma Dome was the decision for the project that the board at the time made when they put it into the package. So I can't speak exactly to the rationale, but I think that the rationale was that the vision that the Tacoma Dome area is and will continue to be a multimodal modern transit station where people can transfer between intercity buses, Amtrak, local buses, Link connecting to the airport in the region, and the T-line connecting to Commerce Street and the rest of the city. So I think that was the rationale. When the T-line was originally built, it was kind of built before Sound Transit had totally spec'd out what the rest of the line was going to look like. So it's built at a very different scale in terms of speed, electrical capacity, and station length. So I would say there isn't a possibility of integrating the two. I think there could be a possibility for having that transfer point of the large link trains being further into downtown, but that would require further study and frankly further money than we have right now.
Thank you. Ryan, I think this one's for you. So you've mentioned that, the way for you guys to revenue is through sales tax. And this question is, sales tax is considered regressive because individuals and families with lower incomes spend more of what they earned on basic expenses. How can your agency pursue other funding sources? And how can the community support those? Or are there other sources?
There are currently no other than raising the cost to ride the bus or getting more grants, which is tenuous right now. The only tool we have is sales tax. So we go to the state every 2 or 3 years and we ask not for the authority to definitely do one of them. We just ask for the ability to ask our community if we can do that. So we do not have property tax. We do not have additional sales tax beyond what we have right now. We do not have car tabs. I just want to make that really clear. We don't have rental car fees, so we don't have those tools, and no local transit agency in the state has those options at this point. So if people are interested in us having those options, we would encourage folks to reach out to their state representatives and have those conversations. We don't know that one of them would work better than the other. We've actually never had those conversations with anybody in our communities because we don't have the options right now.
Thank you. I think this is for you, Andrew. Is there any way to bring Thurston County into Sound Transit organization? People use benefits now, but does it contribute like Pierce King and Snohomish?
Yeah, so I'm going to copy Ryan's answer here a little bit. But yeah, so Thurston County, just for clarity to the second part of the question, Thurston County does not pay into Sound Transit, so they don't pay into the taxes. Of course, anyone from Thurston County can drive up or take a bus up to Pierce County and get on our services. We encourage that. Eventually, when Sounder is in DuPont, it'll be kind of close, so that's interesting. Thurston County to ever join Sound Transit, it would require a change to our authorizing legislation in the legislature, which is a conversation that could be had at some point. I think a tough piece with it that I'll just flag is that there's no model right now where, whether it's Pierce Transit or Sound Transit, and this is part of the challenge, one of the challenges Ryan mentioned earlier with kind of bringing back in these communities that aren't currently in the district. There's no model for folks to join a taxing district partway. So the tax, Sound Transit has added taxes over 30 years, like in 3 times in an iterative way. If someone like Thurston County was to join in the current models we have, they would be joining full force, and that would be a big
Gotcha.
tax shock. So that would be part of the conversation.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip down to the question part of this, but obviously we've all heard about different delays in the T-Link, different kind of a little bit of like, well, that didn't happen because this group didn't do what they were supposed to do, that kind of stuff. So what is being done to reduce the delays because of poor communication and collaboration between the government entities as it relates to Sound Transit?
I think that, in terms of, so the question's about the construction delays, not like service delays. Okay. I think that the collaboration between us and our local permitting jurisdictions is really important. I'll just point out that the way that WashDOT the State Department of Transportation permits projects for the most part is if it's in right of way they own, they just build it and permit it themselves. When we permit projects, the local jurisdiction permits our projects. So in our case, for example, not to pick on them, but just to illustrate the point, the city of Milton, with its handful of planners, will be permitting something they've never seen before. So that partnership between the local jurisdictions and Sound Transit's really important to make sure we don't have additional delays. So that's all about, and that's like central to the government community relation team's work of having open communications, transparency throughout the process to try to address issues early and often so that they don't come up later in the process leading to delays. And I'll just say there's a lot that the local jurisdictions can also do, whether it's their elected officials or planners, to like lean into that partnership. It's a two-way street between us as the regional agency and the local jurisdiction.
I'm going to add on to that a little bit and maybe a minor tangent as the person on the panel who does not represent a government agency. We have problems with jurisdictional buy-in for transit in Pierce County. We've seen the impacts of this. I think about, and I'm sure Ryan will let me bring this up, but I think about bus rapid transit on State Route 7, Pacific Avenue.
Lauren and I are having a little bit of a flash. Go ahead.
And, that project didn't move forward in the way that it had originally been planned, right? We do have the Stream community line, the enhanced bus service, which I am, really impressed by Pierce Transit for being able to pull that forward and increase service, even if it's just at those commuter peak times for Pacific Avenue. I think that's huge and a win out of this situation. But part of the problem with that was conflicts between some of our local jurisdictions about what the priority should be on that roadway, because parts of it are owned by the city of Tacoma, parts of it is Pierce County, and then all of it is state because it's a state highway. And it led to some squabbling about what allowable impacts are to drivers in slowing them down on those spaces. What negatives to drivers are we willing to accept to put good transit forward? And ultimately, transit didn't really win in that conversation. And I'm sure you're going to have something to add to that. But my point in this is that there really is an opportunity as advocates, while the city and the county don't make the decisions around transit, they do either support or not support those transit projects as they move forward. So in the city of Tacoma, there's a lot of conversation right now about how transit incorporates into things like the transportation and mobility plan. That's an update to the comprehensive plan that's currently in draft form. You can find it online. It's a really great document that our city staff have put forward that really emphasizes safety and access. And it does talk about the importance of transit a lot. It talks about the importance of needing expertise in transit, in city staff, and in better incorporating transit into policies and planning projects to ensure that we see really good transit outcomes. So it's great to see that type of commitment moving forward. There just also really have been issues in transit not being prioritized by our jurisdictions until it's the last second and they have to, because this project's either happening or it's not. Right. So I'm sure Ryan will have something to add about Pacific Avenue, but
I don't. Yeah. And Laura knows a lot about the project and I don't have any correction. I will say that the thing that I think as an agency we learned is that we should check to make sure people care before we roll something out. A lot of times an agency like ours or even Sound Transit, we assume everybody sees the light on the things that we're doing. And the work that we did initially on projects like BRT, we didn't get buy-in from the people that we needed to, because planners can talk to planners. If you're not at the county, planning and public works aren't together. And sometimes those groups don't see things the same way. And there's a difference of opinion for how people should move around. And I think it's incumbent upon agencies like ours who are out getting funds to do these projects to make sure that we have buy-in, not just from the planning department, but also from the elected officials and from the communities that we work in. So listen, we haven't built something since the 90s at Pierce Transit. We learned an expensive lesson, but I think the nice thing for us is that when this comes around again, and it will, we'll work with folks like Laura and Downtown on the Go, but we'll also work a lot earlier and a lot better with the city and other agencies to make sure that we get the next one right.
Thank you. So Ryan, you made a pitch for staff. Do you have on-the-job training for maintenance staff? And are you connected to any of the technical colleges to help build up the workforce?
Yeah, we have an apprenticeship. That's a great question. We have an apprenticeship. We welcome folks of all abilities. And we're starting to have further communication with Bates. So one of the things that we've done in the last year is we've started to host themed summits at Pierce Transit. We did one for the business community in October and got some really good contacts. We actually came and have done some events here at Milgard. And one of the things that came out of that was a stronger partnership with Bates. So yes, we do training. I'd mentioned that we're good on bus drivers, but we're always recruiting, and we take people with clean driving records off the street and we turn them into CDL qualified and licensed drivers within a month and a half and get them on the road as soon as we can. So we're big on training. We're big on new recruits. And I will note, we hire a very experienced average employee at Pierce Transit. I think our new driver average age is about 45 years old. So one area that we would love some ideas from the community in is how we attract younger professionals to the field, whether it's working on the front lines or working back at the office.
Thank you. This might be our last question. And I'm going to paraphrase, this is not exactly the question that was asked, but how do we get more frequency for the sounder, Andrew? And is there a way that happens, and how would we do it?
So I can answer this one relatively briefly. I know we're running out of time. So the good news, like I said earlier, is that the Sound Transit 3 program did have quite a bit of money dedicated to the Sounder program, Sounder South specifically. And what happened in the development of it was we had all these prescriptive lines on a map for BRT and light rail, and then the board kind of just put a big chunk of money for and make Sounder better. So that's good news because there's flexibility in terms of what we do. The flip side of that is it wasn't all laid out, so it's taking a little more time. So we have some money dedicated to it. Coming out of the pandemic, the staff with concurrence from the board has said, yes, focus on longer trips because we're not seeing the same, more trips because we're not seeing the same intense peak demand. So looking at what we can do to make it more of a regional system versus just a pure commuter system. And we have resources for it. That's the good news. The bad news is, it's not bad news, it's just the reality is that we don't own most of the tracks. Sound Transit owns, through a strange thing, the tracks from Tacoma Dome to the county line, but all the rest of it we don't own. So all of this is going to require very detailed and expensive negotiations with Burlington Northern Railroad to essentially buy space on their tracks, and that will take time and money. But it's a goal of the board and the staff, I think.
Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up my portion. Thank you guys for great questions. Sorry I did not get through all of them. I tried to combine so I could get through as many as possible. And thank you for being with us this season. It's been great. And we'll see you again next winter, I guess, January next year. All right, Laura?
Yeah. Thank you so much for everybody who attended in person and online. Let's give a round of applause for the other panelists, not me. Feels weird to say my usual stuff when I'm also here on the panel. Really appreciative of all of you for coming and joining us for these conversations, and so much appreciation for Tanisha for being our incredible moderator. I want to tell you all about two things before you walk away. On April 16th, Downtown on the Go is kicking off our 2025 Walk Tacoma series with a walk highlighting Wright Park, Stadium District, and the Tacoma Link. So very excited for that. There's information at downtownonthego.org. I also want to let you know, if you're in the room, in the back of the room, there's some flyers. Otherwise, we can share some information online. But the City of Tacoma and the state are launching an e-bike rebate pilot program in April, where depending on income, you can receive a $300 or $1,200 rebate on an electric bicycle. We'll have more information on that and some fun bike events in the next couple of weeks to support that and get more information out. So keep an eye out for that. With that, thank you all so much, and we'll see you at the next event.